Mi365 podcasts with me, Pete Cohen. Hey everyone! Before we start the podcast today, feel free to head over to mi365.me. That's mi365.me and find out for yourself how you can take advantage of 365 days of free life coaching with me to take you and your life to a whole new level. Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast. Hi, it's Pete Cohen and you join me for another Mi365 podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have an incredible guest with us today, Kenny DeCruz, who is a coach. A lot of people call him a guru. A lot of people call him a great man who has had an unbelievable life. Mi365 is all about hearing other people's stories and seeing if we can take someone from someone else's story to enrich our own life. Good morning, Kenny. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing very, very well. Chuffed to be here. Actually, a little bit scared at the moment because I feel emotionally recently I've opened up. And I can't control my emotions anymore. Something shifted. Something shifted very recently.
Well, you know what? It's one thing that I think a lot of people often are challenged to do. You know, especially men. We often don't talk about our emotions. And yesterday I actually interviewed Richard Mccann. And Richard Mccann has an amazing story to tell, similar to yourself. His mother was the first person to be murdered by the Yorkshire Ripper, and he was, 6 years old, and he told his story, and it was like one thing after another thing after another thing, but he found the strength, probably just like yourself, to keep going, because I know that you have an unbelievable story to tell. But before you tell us that story, just tell us a little bit about what you do, like today, on a day-to-day basis, with as far as professionally is concerned.
The essence of my work is basically shifting people from surviving into living.
Okay.
From being lost boys, it's mainly men I work with, into being self-respected, self-aware men. So it's a subtle but life-changing shift, and it can happen in different ways. And I feel I do it very quickly because, I guess because of my story and where I've been and what I have access to in myself, I can meet people where they are. And then it's almost like going there and then walking out together, but not surviving it, but owning it. Well, and I feel when people own their stories don't own them anymore.
Wow. You know, it's funny, isn't it? In the world of personal development, you can read so many books that tell you what you should and shouldn't do and give you protocols and do this and do this and do this, which I'm sure some of that can be effective. But I think there's nothing more enlightening where you hear someone's story and it gives you a different perspective of them, of yourself, and then it gives people, I don't know, the freedom to make some different choices. So can you please tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
I guess, well, I landed myself with a whole bunch of mental health issues that weren't very recognized. And I came very much from a land of survival. So I was born in Africa. I'm from Uganda. And my family got on the death list. So the Secret Service were after us.
So tell me, how did that happen? How did they get on the death? Because you're of Indian distraction, right?
Well, my family's from Goa. So our community was close-knit, Catholic, old-fashioned Portuguese, very similar to the Victorian ways.
And then so how come you ended up?
Thinking.
Sorry, I lost you just for a second there. It was just the connection, but these things happen. So you said you were from Goa and close-knit community, Catholic. How did you end up? How did your family end up in Uganda?
So both sides of grandparents, my mother's grandparents moved to Uganda. My father's grandparents moved to Kenya. So both parents were born in Africa. So, you know, my family, my grandparents speak Portuguese and Konkani, and then they learnt Konkani is the Goan language, and then they learnt Swahili and obviously English. My parents speak Swahili and English, and that's about it. So we're very much from that bubble in Africa.
So can you ask me again out of curiosity, because my great granddad came from Lithuania in 1890.
Wow.
Why did your family go to Africa? What was it that made them want to go there?
Work. It was quite simply work. There was opportunity. They needed to. My grandfather and my mother's side, the parents died quite early. He needed to take care of his siblings. So there was an ad in the paper. They moved to Africa. I think he moved to Angola first and then eventually to Uganda. And he did well. He was, amongst his peers, instrumental in setting up the church. Meanwhile, he sent money home so his siblings could be educated and taken care of. He put his brother through seminary. So it was parenting his siblings as well as his own children.
Wow.
But they needed to take care of themselves, and it was, I guess, purely survival. They have their ancestral home and all that. Well, they did have. It was all stolen when the Indians took Goa over from the Portuguese, so everything went. But it was pure survival.
Wow. So tell me about your upbringing. How?
It was absolutely bliss. I had the happiest, most wonderful childhood. We went to our school, our church, our community, the sunshine, the quality of life, the food. Just it was an absolute dream. And then there was trouble. There was Idi Amin trouble. And my mother ran the Catholic bookshop, which supplied all the churches and the universities and the schools, etc. And I got the best toys that came in from abroad into the bookshop. So I had it made. My father he ran different departments in the Uganda Post Office, the philatelic bureau. So he's got a suitcase full of stamps. But then when the trouble hit, he was running the parcel department. And I know a lot more details recently because for the first time I've read my mother's book, only about 10 days ago.
Wow.
I asked her to write. It's always with the survival that we've been through. We haven't talked about things. And since being very young, it wasn't cool to talk about things. We're busy surviving. And if someone cracks, then maybe we'll all crack and then survival gone. Maybe that would be the end. So
Wow.
it's a survival thing.
So tell us about Idi Amin, because I mean a lot of people obviously know who he is, but a lot of people they don't. I mean he was a pretty crazy dictator, right?
I remember we used to love to watch the Beverly Hillbillies, Star Trek, things like that on TV. And in the middle of peak viewing, Idi Amin would come on and say, "God spoke to me. The Martians landed in my swimming pool and they talked through God and told me what I have to do." And then came the threats of how he was going to kill us, where he was going to take us. There was once when he was filmed in a helicopter, laughing and talking, and he landed and said, "If the Asians are not out by a certain date," I think it was 3 months or something, "this is the holiday camp that I'd take you to." And there were coffins and things all over the place.
So how old were you when you saw this?
7, maybe 8, 7, I think. I was a very aware child. I knew what was going on.
Because obviously through my own ancestry, if my great grandparents hadn't have got out of Lithuania, having obviously, as you know, being Jewish, I always thought to myself, because that was at a different era where there was only whispering going on. People saying, "Look, this could happen. You need to leave." And I would imagine that some people went, "Okay," maybe a very few people said, "Okay, let's go. Let's leave everything we own and let's go." And the others probably thought, "Well, no, we've been here for years. Nothing's going to happen."
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Reading my mother's book, I was astounded at how bad it had to get before they just got out. And it was difficult. We didn't know that we would be let out, and we left without my father. He got higher and higher on the death list. We had a phone call one night saying, "We're going to come and kill you tonight." That night we went into hiding. The servants lived just up the road, and they were friends, and they checked out and said, yeah, a few times they came. So no more church, no more school, no more home. We were in hiding. Phones were tapped. We were followed. It was not safe for anyone to know us. So we had to cut ourselves off from everyone and we were on our own.
You know what? It's fascinating to me because, Kenny, you're probably aware that sometimes things have to get so bad for people for them to do something about something.
Yeah.
You know, like they get diabetic or they get diagnosed with cancer, or, you know, before they think, okay, I'll stop smoking. You know, with your story, what is fascinating to me is that how bad do things have to get for people? I mean, you've got the leader of the country coming on saying, if you guys don't go, you're going to end up in a coffin, and yet still people still. Why do you think that is in people, that is it they don't want to accept the truth? Is it that they're scared? What's your kind of take on that?
I think partly this does not compute. This is our world. They had a blissful world, and a third world country. Who knows what could happen? Who knows what could pass? Idi Amin didn't live far away from us. So there was always gunfire nearby. When the tanks drove by, the whole house shook. I remember when the gunfire was vaguely in the distance, my parents would put Jim Reeves on. As it got closer, they would put Julie London on.
Yeah.
So it's like different records for different distance of bullets, of gunfire. It was hilarious. But we really believed that something would shift. This can't carry on. It did not make sense. It was only when we had the phone call that they thought, we need to get out now. So we went into hiding, and it was difficult. There were a lot of things that were against us. So even if people wanted to leave, that we needed to get visas. We had British passports. We needed to get visas or injections or whatever it was. And the way that they set it up is, irrespective of whether you're in hospital or not, you queue in the sunshine while these people kind of, toy with us, because it's not that long after independence. So it was powerful Africans, even if it's just doctors and nurses, getting their own back after being the underdogs, getting their own back on the way that things were controlled. And from what I understand, the Indians, who were just brilliant business people, ran the country, and they were angry about this. And I didn't realize until reading my mother's book recently the difference between the Indians and the Goans. Because, for example, when we were at the airport, and it was quite known that people were fiddled with or shot or, badly searched, like abused, basically, including sexually abused, and their things were taken. And this is at the airport. There are times when a plane, just before it's taken off, they'd stop it, they'd take someone off because it's a teacher or a doctor, or they decided that this person wouldn't leave, and people would be shot. So we were without my father. We weren't allowed any money. We were only allowed hand luggage. And the soldiers were, there wasn't a lot of money, but they were given drugs. So they could do things without any conscience or feeling. They were given power. They could take what they want. They could do what they want. And you can't blame them, I guess, for doing so.
Yeah, of course.
We couldn't open a suitcase. The guy turned vicious. My mother's a 4'10", petite, little, wonderful little woman. She was a little princess. We had a charmed life in Africa. And the guy was livid. What happened? Did he break open one of the cases? Something like that. And he saw there was a statue of St. Anthony, or there were rosaries as well. And straight away, his face changed, and he said, "You're going. I didn't realize you were going. You're good people." It's almost as if you're not the ones that have been taking our money or controlling us. So everyone put the Goans and the Indians in very, very, very different bags. And there were 2 or 3 times when we should have been killed, basically, or at least badly damaged, when they suddenly realized that we're going, and therefore they not only left us alone, but even helped us out. So the miracles that we have had, I remember the times when we would be in one car being followed, thinking if we go left, we could be ambushed. If we go right, then there's that dodgy turning, and which one's the safe one to go, while following a truck with a trail of blood. And my aunt and uncle, maybe 1 or 2 cars behind us, both of us on my toy walkie-talkies, trying to figure out how to get from A to B without being killed. So it was heavy.
So how did that kind of affect you, do you think?
Um, I knew there was stuff up. And to me, it's not, oh my God, this is terrible. There've been a lot of dramas in my life. It's quite simply my experience. It's only now, talking to you, that it's a dramatic story. But that was my normality.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of nasty situations, scary situations that happened in refugee camp. And then after refugee camp, we moved to a small town in Wales that was wonderful, but they'd never seen coloured people before. So they didn't know whether we were cannibals or Red Indians. They were looking for bows and arrows in the house and stuff like that. But all of this was quite simply my experience. It wasn't good or bad or ugly. It was my experience.
Well, sorry, I'm just saying that I would be fascinated up in my head, and I'm sure many other people are probably also thinking, well, if that had happened to me, how would that have affected me?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember as a child, one of the first things I remember thinking was, is there something wrong with me? I remember...
Totally.
And that was a thought I must have had for years and years and years and not really know it was there. I just thought, well, there is something wrong with me because I'm not like everyone else. Did you have something like that? I mean, what was your kind of relationship like with yourself from having gone through all of this? How did you feel about yourself?
I was busy holding it together. At the airport, my father put his hand on my shoulder and said, to the words of, "You may never see me again. You're now the head of the family. Take care of your mother and brother." Wow. So I was on duty. There was no space for me to think, how am I? It was somehow. We didn't know where the plane would land. We didn't know where we'd sleep, what we'd eat, what it's like. For us, England was stories, the Fairy Liquid advertisement, and England looked very good on the Fairy Liquid advertisement, and TV, stuff we saw on TV. So somehow that little boy needed to be a man. And I guess that for a lot of my life, I was a very respected little boy pretending to be a man. And irrespective of what other people thought, I needed to be my own man that I know and respect and is not a surviving little boy and is not taking care of everyone's emotions, is not second guessing. And with all of this trauma, it left me with mental health issues. From my preteens, I had obsessive compulsive disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, Tourette's, trichomania, where, pulling hair and punching my skin with compass, and all of these are kind of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, I think we all had. It was all anxiety. It was all panic. It was all coming from, in a way, I almost believed that my body was addicted to the adrenaline. So I would recreate situations. I've been in the music business, newspapers, things with deadlines. So my body could still get flooded to the adrenaline that it got used to. And I needed to unlearn that and undo that and turn into my own man. That was not a way to live a life.
Wow. I love that you said that your body was probably giving you lots of different messages and the adrenaline. But tell me, when you're working with people now, what's your approach to helping people? It sounds like you want people to be their own person. Tell me about your philosophy and tell me what it is that you're trying to do with people.
It depends on who I'm working with and how. The two main things I do, one is voice dialogue, especially with men, which is a very simple technique. And it's usually a 2-hour session where I get to directly speak to their protector, for example, and we have a conversation. And we have a conversation about the person, but the protector and I speak about the person, the client. I speak to the inner man that's emerging. I speak to the traumatized child. I speak to the different parts and get to know what's really going on. And I feel like it's, if you see a child in Waitrose or Sainsbury's or whatever going, "Mummy, mummy, mummy," and the mother ignores the child, it's going to get louder and it's going to get louder until it has a tantrum. And the mother finally goes, "Yes, Johnny, what do you want?" And then the child stops. he is met. There is no need to make a noise. It's the same on the inside. There are different parts that sometimes just need to be heard, or just need to know that the war is over, need to know that protecting is actually now limiting or killing this person,
Wow.
taking its life. And then it turns from survival into living. So that's a very efficient and simple way, and it can be life-changing very quickly.
So let's talk about living, but let me again, beautiful, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, I can't help but think of my own life, which I'm sure many people will. I had a pretty challenging upbringing, but it's all relative, right? It doesn't matter. Most people's lives are challenging, but some people, much more. I remember thinking, yeah, there's definitely something wrong with me. But no one ever, I don't ever remember anyone actually asking me, how do you feel? How do you really feel?
Yeah.
So we just kind of carry on. We keep the dialogue inside, and you're right, we all try to survive to get by. And growing up, I suppose, anywhere in the world can be quite challenging. Going to school, conforming, who do I like? What do I do? Do I take drugs? Do I hang out with this person? Do I listen to that music? And it's all trying to fit in.
Yeah.
And what you've painted an amazing picture of. You just had to survive. You couldn't feel. You couldn't be your own person because Dad's saying to you. I mean, what a thing to say to a child. You're the head of the family.
Yeah, and he was so traumatized. He could have been killed. He should have been dead by then. He was actually smuggled out he was working with the United Nations and the Red Cross, and he was smuggled out on Refugee Day. They were on execution day. They were waiting at one part of the airport, thinking he's going to Kenya because he was brought up in Kenya. Meanwhile, his papers were taken away and he was put on another plane. And the next thing we know is we get a phone call from Italy. So we're in Britain in a refugee camp. You're in Italy. We have no home, no money, no idea. And we had a pretty tough time in refugee camp because we didn't know what was going on. We were the only goers, pretty much. So what are we going to do? It was traumatic all around. So I don't know if I was that man, if I was my father, whether I'd say the same thing or whether I'd say something better or worse. It's a very, very traumatic situation.
Yeah, of course.
I would expect anyone to get anything necessarily right in a highly traumatic situation.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's like you've got to pass it on. It's like, but, it's like it seemed like there's nothing else. It's like, well, you're head of the family. I might not be here. It's your responsibility. And of course, it's like, were you ready for that responsibility? Well, probably not.
Who cares?
Yeah, but you had to get on with
reality.
it. You can say, that was your reality. So what I'd love to explore with you is how you went from surviving to living. And what is the difference? What does living mean to you? Because I think there's living and there's existing, which is just getting by. What does living actually mean to you?
For me, I am in love. I'm in love with my wife. My name's actually Kenny Marmarella Di Cruz. My wife's Italian, so we put our names together. I couldn't be available to her or even attract her unless I was available and present with myself.
What does that mean, being available and present with yourself?
It's being here and now without being owned by the past or trying to control the future, without shadow breathing, without fixing things, without second guessing who thinks what and what's going on, but just being present here and now and coming from my center and extending myself to meet life from there. And to meet life that's actually bigger than me, rather than I know how to control this, I know how to fix this, I know how to survive this. So it's attracting opportunities, I know that the best things and the best people that have ever happened in my life have just showed up. Irrespective of anything that I've thought or tried to work out, they've showed up. Now, in the past, when I was surviving, all that showed up was more stuff to survive, because that's what I was that's what I was attracting. It's let me do what I'm good at. I'm good at surviving crap, so I attracted crap to survive. It's like an old PA I had, a brilliant troubleshooter. So she attracted trouble,
Yeah.
And then she was troubleshooting. It's really as simple as that. But it was a huge thing for me to turn around
So,
because
so powerful. Go on. Yeah, go on. Go on. So a huge thing for you to turn around. Why? Because of what
even
you'd been
before,
through.
yeah, and even before that, there was trauma in the family, especially my father's side. He had post-traumatic stress disorder. He is the most wonderful, huge, open-hearted man. My parents are wonderful people, but they have been through stuff. So my father was a survivor with post-traumatic stress disorder. So there was that to survive. There was the death threats and all of that. There was losing our homes and our lives and our community and being totally isolated. There was stuff in refugee camps, and so it went on and on and on and on. And I was stuck with these mental health issues that are, almost seen as a luxury because we were in working class Wales with a really great community, but it was working class, impoverished survival.
Hmm.
So mental health issues, get over it. There's stuff to do. So I
Yeah.
was grunting and twitching and picking at myself and God knows what to take the edge off, basically. And I had to stop. It was socially unacceptable. It was not good. And I had to slowly, therapy, well, we believed it was for Hollywood stars. That's the way it was. We
Hmm.
certainly didn't have the time or the money. We needed to survive.
So tell me, because this is so amazing to hear. Every time I speak to someone, I'm always learning, and I love that thing of surviving, and then going from surviving to living, where you can feel alive, you can manifest things start happening for you, and I know that most of my life, and so many people I've worked with, they've been in survival mode.
Yeah.
So, what was the biggest step that you had to take internally to go from surviving to living?
I needed to take the risk because to stop surviving and start living was like suicide. To be off guard and to be open to life and anything could happen. I needed to there was no space for me. I was coming from, am I? Am I safe? Am I going to be humiliated? Am I going to be rejected? Am I causing harm? And so it went on. And it was all a sense of self from other people and handing power over. I needed to come from I am, which was I am safe. I
Mm,
am loved.
yeah.
I'm coming from my center and I can respond to life, I can attract good things, and I can take risks to come alive. And that was huge. And I needed to unlearn a lot of programming, a lot of survival, all of these things. And as I unlearned these things, I picked up the tools to walk my path. And in a nutshell, it took me years to work this out. There was nothing. I just needed to work it out myself and turn my life around and in effect do the same for those around me. But I needed to start with me rather than being part of the victim club who never leaves and we all survive together. I thought, I don't want to be carrying people on my shoulders. I don't want enmeshed codependent relationships. I want to walk beside people or maybe a bit in front or maybe a bit behind. But, my shoulders are for me.
You know what? You know what, Kenny? I have so much love for you, my friend. It's very hard to put into words. But again, you just said something so profound, which was going from that negative self-talk, which so many people live. I'm not good
Yeah.
enough. I can't do this. To going which is what I call level 4 self-talk, which is where you start going, I am.
Yeah.
I am good enough. I can do this. I am in control. I have what it takes. And thank you so much for being so honest about that transition of because when something is familiar and you let go of that, it's like, well, this isn't familiar.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
unknown. So I could
Absolutely.
understand. Well, what was driving you forwards? This is what I would love to. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I would love to know what was driving you forwards. Was it the fact that you just had enough, or was it the fact that also you knew that there was something bigger for you? You knew that you had a bigger part to play in your own life and other people's lives.
I had no idea about the future. And I was a survivor, with no money. and with all these mental health issues, trying to get an education, trying to make my parents proud by passing exams, pushing everything down, etc., etc. I just needed to follow. I needed to follow. I needed to be free. And I needed, as a young child, I wanted to put my parents and my family back to the peace and joy that we were used to. And as a very young child, it's when is my daddy going to show up and take us home and tell us everything's going to be okay? It never happened. Uganda doesn't exist anymore in that way. That was a time and place. And eventually, I think it was about 10, 12 years ago, what I actually did to set us all free was it took a year to get rid of all the hoarding in my family home. And that's like emotional baggage and safety. It's what people that lose everything do. And then it took a while for me to refurb the house. And I was sneaky enough, I couldn't move on in my life if my parents were coming from a refugee home. And to an extent, my fantasy was could my brother and neither could I. So after all the hoarding was cleared up, then it was time to refurb the house. And my God, the third world electric work that my father did was not safe. But then we're from a third world country. But it was refurbing the house and almost giving them a house from which I needed to come, to be present and safe and normal. I just, all my life, I just wanted to be invisible and normal. So forget my story, forget all of that. It doesn't exist. I need to be normal. I need to be invisible. And why even tell people this story? They won't feel it, they won't get it, and it feels glamorous. And I guess now what I do with my work is I can receive people's stories. I can understand. It's like Columbo. I can see the script. I can see where the script keeps repeating. I can see the main players in the script that keep changing each other. And it could be from a parent to a business partner to a lover to best friends, whatever it is, but it's the same script. I can see the belief system that comes behind that. I can see where the belief system comes from. And we just shift that. We can name it. And once it's named, and this is naming it, not shaming it or blaming it, which is people's biggest fear, but it's naming it. So it's disempowered and it can shift. And then we get them, because I was addicted to my thoughts. So, and then, as I bring up in men's groups and when I give talks, is there are two things about my thinking. I've come up with basically one outcome. If I keep on thinking, all I want to do is be in control. That's what my thinking kind of always gives me, control. And control limits things. So the best that I could possibly achieve or manifest by thinking is the best that I've ever achieved before. And that's control. No space for anything else. So if that's the best I can manifest, why bother? And the second thing is, if I continue thinking, there is only one outcome. All roads lead to, not Rome, all roads lead to suicide. Because committing suicide would be the only way that I could be in control of everything. And it's not a big, heavy, dramatic commit suicide. It's remove myself from the situation, stop the pain. And I've worked a lot with suicidal men. And it has been, I just want the pain to stop. It's not always that emotional. It's, I can't do this. I can't figure out how to figure myself out of this. So it is basically just wanting the pain to stop. It's really as simple as that. So dealing with issues like this, it's like, okay, how do I get people to stop? And this is where, for me, it's in the moment. It's not read this book, do this workshop, do this long program, then I'll upsell you to another program. Some people need that kind of thing, and some people need therapy for weeks, months, or years. That's fine if it works for them. Most of my men, I teach them to turn it around in the moment. And for me, what I worked out is when I find myself lost in space, in my head, working it out and stressing and fart-arsing, trying to whatever, I catch myself and I stop mid-sentence, mid-thought, and I take a deep breath in And as I breathe in, I think, thank you for reminding me who I used to be.
Mm.
And it's used to be, it's in the past, and that makes space in the present. And as I breathe out, I take part with what's in front of me. So it turns around in the moment. And that's the way I make space for me to come from the present, present and connected in a breath.
Well, you know what? We've just spent a whole week on my live broadcast focusing on this very area of self-talk. And there's so many things that I would love to talk to you about. I'd love to have you as a guest. But just a couple more things. One is obviously, how can people find out more about you? That's one question. But the other question is, tell me what you actually think is possible in terms of human beings, regardless of your background, regardless of what has happened. What do you believe that human beings have the capability to do?
I have this fantasy that before I came down this lifetime, I agreed that I would contribute in certain ways. There are people, maybe a soul group or something, that I need to complete things with or do things with, and there are things for me to learn. And then coming down, it's like, how am I going to remember? I can't bring all the awareness down this lifetime because, with that much awareness, they'll cancel themselves out. So I miss out on the experience. So I believe at some level that I thought, if I can hide some clues or dramas or things that as I unlearn them, I pick up my tools, those are clues for my path. And, people talk about purpose and passion and all of that. Yeah, totally, I believe it. And I believe that I can have a purpose. And once I achieve that purpose, or once that's just simply part of me and my daily life, then I can get the next level and the next level. And who I am and what I do and how efficient and how heart-opening and how satisfying it is, this is beyond my wildest dreams. It's just like, from Africa, from working class Wales, like very few people leave the town. And it's a wonderful place, but there wasn't enough space for me. What am I doing moving to Britain? What am I doing the work I do? What am I doing, the way that I'm writing? And, it's like, who is this guy? It's outrageous. So it's limitless. That doesn't mean that the more glamorous or the more off service, the better. For some people, it might be, my purpose is to bring up my children. My purpose is to manage my health. My purpose is to learn how to take care of myself after whatever it is. It doesn't have to be some big deal, but it's limitless. The sky's the limit. And it's not about upbringing or resources or this one's privileged and that one's not. Sure, for some people it helps. A lot of my clients are rich and famous and very empty and lost. It's about the relationship to what happened. It's about the relationship to life. And for me, it's about Columbo. What is life trying to tell me? And how am I willing to respond? And when I respond, I'm coming from my center and I'm meeting life at my edge. When I react, I'm coming from fear, I'm not breathing, and I'm just feeding that drama and going round in circles and doing what I used to do best, survive.
Wow. I am literally lost for words. I cannot thank you enough for your time. I know that my life has changed from this time that we've spent together, and I know it's going to affect people in a positive way. I really appreciate you speak so from the heart. And look, tell us, how can people find out more about you?
themanwhisperer.co.uk. Newsweek wrote a chapter about me in a book, and they called me the Man Whisperer. And I thought, oh my God, that's so cool. Plus Newsweek, that's proper grown-up stuff. It's not some hippie magazine. And the hippie magazines are fine, but to be acknowledged by Newsweek. So they wrote the Man Whisperer chapter. And if you type in, www.themanwhisperer.co.uk, then there's the site. You can subscribe to the newsletter, watch the YouTubes, read the blogs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But since I turned 50, my mission has been to pass on whatever I have. So I'm starting to train people on how to run men's groups. I'm just passing whatever I can on for free with the YouTubes and everything else. I want to pass it on. And I believe that life is, oh my God, life is so looking after me. and providing for me. And all I need to do is be in alignment, and life supports it. When I'm out of alignment, then, I get the cosmic feedback.
Listen, I really appreciate it, guys. Go and check out the website, themanwhisperer.com. Look at the YouTube, subscribe to the newsletter, spread the word, let people know that there's someone out there that can be of great help and great service to people. Kenny, thank you so much for your time today. I've absolutely loved it, and I look forward to meeting you and speaking to you again. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's been a joy. Thank you so much for meeting me.